Ever since War Thunder was created, the developers have had a lot of trouble modeling high explosive shells. Balancing them in a way that is realistic, fair, and practical is a complex task, one that Gaijin has taken multiple cracks at. Back when ground forces were first introduced, high explosive shells were pretty overpowered, with tanks like the M4A3105 stomping everything. In response to this, HE shells were nerfed, though this was largely an overreaction. Hullbreak was a mechanic designed to make high explosive performance against light vehicles more realistic, in addition to making it so that light vehicles could no longer shrug off kinetic rounds. Hullbreak was ultimately incredibly inconsistent and more often than not, overly sensitive. A lot of people, myself included, were heavily critical of the system, and apparently the devs didn't like it very much either. Recently, Hullbreak was completely replaced with the pressure mechanic, also referred to as overpressure. While this mechanic is an overall improvement, there are a lot of things that could use some adjustment. Before we get into that though, I'm going to take a quick second to talk about my sponsor. I've partnered with Apex Gaming to make a line of pre-built gaming PCs, so if you're looking to upgrade, it might be worth checking out. You can use my username as a discount code on checkout. Link is in the description and comments. Now let's get back into it. I talked about pressure pretty briefly before, right when it was introduced. Since I made it so soon after it was implemented, I only mentioned the most apparent issues at that time, like how high explosive shells interact with the open-top vehicles. Turns out, pressure has a few more things that could stand to be changed. One of the more egregious aspects, and one I'm sure plenty of people are aware of now, is how low caliber HE punches way above its weight. I'm certain most people have seen those videos of Sergeant York's friendly killing Object 279s with high explosive, but it doesn't only apply to those two vehicles. I think that the root of this issue lies in how the game deals with compartments and components. Basically, pressure works as follows. If a high explosive round manages to hit an internal module with shrapnel, the crew will then die to the round shockwave. The game is making the assumption that, since the round hit an internal component, it must have had enough power to destroy the entire vehicle. Problem is, what the game considers to be an internal component is inconsistent, and often doesn't make a lot of sense. In the case of most Russian tanks, practically every component is considered internal. The system also doesn't seem to consider the size of the round very much. Just by hitting a component that's technically internal, like an optic or gun breach, that can instantly kill a vehicle. Obviously this isn't super realistic with lower caliber rounds. A 40mm isn't going to kill a T90 by hitting an optic. Fixing this would be relatively easy. For one, you could disable pressure for certain shell calibers or shell types. I don't think that would have an adverse effect on gameplay, since the only things you should be pressure killing with 40mm HE would be dying to the shell shrapnel anyway. You could also disable the effect for high explosive rounds that are part of a belt. Finally, Gaijin could make it so only certain calibers will affect different components. That seems like it would be a lot harder to implement though. The second point also relates to the size of high explosive shells, but on the opposite side of the spectrum. Simply put, large caliber shells are way too powerful in near-miss scenarios, with light vehicles being instantly killed by rounds landing in their general proximity. This can happen even with ATGMs. It seems like the lethal ranges are way larger than they should be, likely due to how pressure damage is applied. Like I said earlier, pressure damage is applied when an internal component is hit with shrapnel. Problem is, shrapnel flies way farther than a shockwave will while it's still lethal. This could be fixed by giving rounds a certain lethal radius based on explosive weight, with a system somewhat similar to the penetration calculator. Finally, let's recap open-top vehicles. Right now, if you shoot an open-top vehicle on the upper front plate with a small high explosive shell, it will instantly kill the crew, despite there being no path for the pressure wave to do so. The game apparently makes no distinction between open-top and open-air vehicles. This should only be happening if the round hits the top side of the turret, but that might be difficult to model. Sorry if this video felt kinda disjointed. I've not been feeling great recently. Hope you guys enjoyed it anyway, and I'll see you on the next one.